Hey baby, I hear those blues are calling. It's time for the Frazier on Frazier podcast. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Adam Frazier, and with me, as always, is my good friend, Wes Corwin. Hello, Wes.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good.
So we are here today to talk about episode, what is it? It's 14.
We're
Wow.
on 14, episode 14. You cannot buy me love. You can't do it.
Can't buy me love.
Which is coincidentally the name of the episode. I was just making a comment.
Right. You can't. Season 1, episode 14, Can't Buy Me Love. So, Wes, any thoughts on this episode before we kind of delve into it, analyze it?
So this was
pick it apart.
Here's an interesting thing, and I don't want to come at this. I don't want to. We've come to this podcast table, this table of podcast, with a very positive attitude. I'm still digesting this one. I don't know if it was as strong as the other ones. I think I think there was a fun dichotomy. It was fun to watch Frasier and Bulldog have very different date experiences. I think Frasier kind of got played himself in a way that it was. What do you think? What did you think of this one?
Frasier didn't really have much of a date in this one.
No, he didn't. He was mostly hanging out with a 12-year-old who's been 9 for 3 years.
Right, and I don't know. You say he played himself. I think the woman he was on the date with, I think it was somewhat of an overreaction on her part. I don't really understand her reasoning for wanting to call off of the date just because, granted, Frasier was accusing her of stuff, but it was stuff that her daughter lied to him about.
Right. That's definitely...
And him as a concerned, person.
As like an adult, this child just went like... First of all... Okay, let's get into the episode, because I feel like we both have thoughts. I feel like we're both coming from the same place. Let's get there and then react in that moment.
All right then. So, we start off. We start off KACL radio station Bulldogs on the air.
Mm-hmm.
And Frasier is he left his bag in Bulldog studio, and he doesn't want to go get it because every time he goes in during Bulldog is doing a show, mm-hmm. Bulldog puts him on the air, and humiliates him, but he goes in anyway.
He makes him look like a big nerd, and he asks Roz to go in. Apparently, Bulldog is just the big man on campus. He's the hot dog. He's the short man on campus. Yeah, he is very diminutive, as we'll also cover. But anytime anybody goes into the studio while he's recording, he just mocks them and makes a segment out of it. And that's the whole sort of deal. So Frasier asks Roz if she'll go in there, but she has apparently also been bullied by Bulldog. So Frasier tries to sneak in. He tries to grab his bag. Bulldog actually takes the bag off the table, throws it further away, and then forces Frasier onto the air to grab his bag, and then asks him the thoughts about a game that is not happening.
A game that does not exist. He asks him who will be the winner, Frasier.
To prove,
and of course, Frasier not knowing any better, he answers.
He picks one, and then Bulldog mocks him, and then he picks the other, and Bulldog mocks him, and he's like, well, somebody's got to win, and it's like, yeah, somebody would if they were playing it, and then plays the sound of a donkey braying like a jackass.
Frasier he does snap. He's like, oh, I wish you were playing it on my show. That deserves a much larger audience. And Bulldog doesn't really reply to this. He just kind of
cuts, which is interesting. I believe it's possible that Frasier has grown his audience, but I remember several episodes ago, I believe we established canonically at this point in the show, Bulldog is the more popular radio host among all demographics except for that one select 35 to 50-year-old women demographic.
Well, perhaps. I don't know if because judging, I don't know who's the bigger celebrity, honestly. Mm-hmm. I feel like out of I mean, we don't see that much of Bulldog just sort of day to day. We see Frazier day to day, and there are plenty of episodes where he gets recognized.
He does get recognized, but it's important to remember they're both early morning AM radio hosts, so they're gods at this point. They are the peak of the entertainment industry.
I just think it's interesting that Bulldog doesn't really know what to say to Frazier's comeback, which is pretty in line with Bulldog's character. He's not the cleverest.
No, he's not very bright. He's not a bright man.
He can dish out insults, but if you counter him with a witty retort, then he doesn't quite know what to do.
Right.
So yeah, we have that whole. That's just sort of establishing Bulldog's presence in this episode. That doesn't really serve a whole lot of purpose, I would think, in the larger episode as a whole. Mm-hmm. Just letting the audience know, hey, Bulldog's in this episode.
Bulldog, for the fifth or sixth time, he remains a periphery of the cast. I don't know if we'd call him in a part of the main cast yet, but he's definitely in the mix.
He's in a lot of publicity photos. That's the one thing I've noticed. He's in a lot of publicity photos, along with Roz and Frazier and Niles and Daphne and Eddie and Martin. So it's not like he's a minor character. He's kind of, but then again, he is. It's not as if he gets.
I doubt we're gonna see him grow. I don't know if we'll go on much of a character arc style journey with Bull. I hope I do. I very much look forward to seeing Bulldog realize that you shouldn't do impressions of Chinese people. But maybe we won't get there. I'm not sure if we will.
Yeah, it'll. I can't say.
I'd love to see a very special episode following Bulldog realizing the harm caused by stereotypes, but I don't think we'll get there.
Oh, that'll be the episode you and I write.
All right.
So we got our next scene, a chump off the old block, like a chip off the old block, but a chump. So it's the Frazier residence. Niles he knocks on the door. He's there because Maris is out of town.
He took Maris to the train and then went straight over to Frazier's to hang out. Presumably with the cover stories with his family, he just wants to hang out with Daphne. So before you could argue maybe he's enamored, he's got a little bit of a crush. At this point, we've got to be at least 3 or 4 months in to him actively pursuing cheating on his spouse. Niles is a monster. I love him as a character, but he is a terrible man.
He doesn't really have a plan, though. Like I think is the thing that makes it.
It's a very childlike, immature pursuit. Is he just wants to be around her and look at her face all the time?
Right. He doesn't have like a plan to seduce her or anything like that.
No, not at all.
At this point, he's just hoping that she, by the sheer fact that he's around so often, I guess that she'll fall in love with him.
Right. But then what happens from there? Because he's still actively married.
You have a point. I don't know. He kills Maris at that point, I guess.
I mean, we'll get there.
She's going to Chicago, Maris, and I don't think do they actually say why she's going to Chicago? Does she have family there?
No, we don't.
I know she's got a sister.
We do not give a reason. We just know. No, we don't know. We know that she took the train. Because
she didn't want to take a plane.
Didn't want to fly
because of a harrowing incident
in which she got bumped from first class, and she still has screaming nightmares.
Not any sort of life-threatening situation. Just it's Maris, so she has to be in first class, and if she's bumped from that, then all hell breaks loose. I was expecting maybe a joke about her going to see like a plastic surgeon or like some ridiculous reason why she was going to Chicago.
Right. Instead, she's just going to Chicago, which is an interest. Not a lot of flavor to it.
Yeah. So Niles basically comes over. He's celebrating.
Right.
That Maris is out of town. He brought champagne.
And
Frazier comes home. Martin confronts Frazier. He wants Frazier to ask someone at the radio station. Well, I'm not doing the setup, but basically, he wants Bulldog to be part of this bachelor auction. The setup is that he's asking Frazier for his help with this bachelor auction, and the implication is that he's asking Frazier when in fact he's asking Frazier to ask Bulldog. That's the joke.
This is a bachelor auction for the Widows and Orphans Fund, and the difficulty with a Widows and Orphans Fund is typically there's a lot of politicking between the widows and the orphans as to who gets what percentage of the fund. But hopefully they'll work together and for their
very bloody fights break out.
Of course, between the widows and the orphans, and the widows are like, "My husband left me," and the orphans are like, "We don't have parents," and it just goes sort of back and forth in that way.
Ugly scene, but Martin is trying to drum up some bachelors, some hot guys for these women to bet on. No, not bet on.
Hot ticket. Yeah, bid. They are going to pay money for them, and it's an interesting sort of dichotomy. So I'm excited to get to the. But anyway, we fast forward. Frazier and Bulldog have both agreed to be part of these dates. One character I hope we meet later down the line is apparently in Seattle. There's a public television star called Mr. Science, who I imagine is just like a human molecule, like a human atom with a little electron whirling around him in a circle.
He is science personified. He is he's no physical form. He's just exactly.
I imagine like Mr. What's the little cartoon at the beginning of Jurassic Park? That's who I imagine.
But we don't see him. It's an announcer saying, "Oh, here's Mr. Science, ladies."
And then women scream for Mr. Science. They are very excited and aroused by Mr. Science.
So it's backstage at this auction. Bulldog and Frazier are getting ready to go on. Frazier's nervous. And Bulldog isn't. He's
right.
They're comparing what their dates are going to be like. Bulldog, he's going to take his date to a basketball game.
Front floor seats at the Sonics, which are a Seattle basketball team, and I believe Bulldog is also going to let them get to home plate, which is it's not third base is fond. I guess third base. I don't know. Basically, he's gonna let whatever woman bids on him successfully rub his buns of steel, and then insist that Frazier feel his ass, which is. Just to get it warmed up, I guess. Frazier, meanwhile, apparently thinks this is like a prostitution scenario and insists he has no intention on putting out and plans on shaking his date's hand at the door, which is two very different preparations.
I mean, this is just me, but if I were a woman, I would definitely prefer Frazier's evening to Bulldog's.
Oh, okay.
I mean, having a nice dinner at a fancy apartment, that sounds better than, for me personally, as a person who doesn't like sports.
I see. So in this scenario, you're a woman and you don't like sports. I see. Well, then yes, of course.
I'm me, but I'm a woman, so I still have sort of the same.
You know what? That's
likes and dislikes.
That's a very progressive awareness, Adam. If you were a woman, all that would change would be your genitals. Oh, Maggie, I'm getting word from my producer, Maggie, our producer on the podcast. She is pointing out Adam.
My producer. What?
Adam, I'm getting word from my personal producer on the podcast. A reminder that your sister, Lacey, enjoys wrestling. Is that true? Is that accurate? She enjoys the sport?
I don't know.
Amateur wrestling? Is that wrong?
I guess.
She enjoys PWR? Wrestling? Oh, Adam, you also enjoy Party World Wrestling.
I do enjoy Party World.
I would like to reply to my producer real quick. That's more of a pageantry in a theater than a sport. There's more of a
right. I would argue there's a big difference between sort of an amateur wrestling match where people throw pizzas at each other,
right,
and just all sorts of mayhem,
right,
to a professional basketball game,
right.
One I find very entertaining, the other I do not.
Understandable. So we're getting in the weeds. The point is, they are. So Martin goes back and he finds TJ Smith, a linebacker for the Seattle Seahawks. Is that a real person? Is what I was.
No, I looked it up. He's an actor, Brett Miller.
Brett Miller.
Yeah, who is I don't know if he's playing a real person, but the fact that he's an actor playing this character, playing TJ linebacker, makes me think that he's not a real person. He was in the Omega Code. Do you remember the Omega Code?
I do not remember the Omega Code.
Yeah, that's I think the only thing that's the only thing like in his top 4 IMDb like known for movies that I recognize, and that's only because I remember seeing it briefly out of the corner of my eye at a Hollywood video like 20 years ago.
Oh man, he was in an episode of Baywatch Nights.
Was that the one where they had it was like Baywatch, but it had like sort of a supernatural twist on it?
Yes. Okay.
We're gonna get on another tangent.
At some point, we've got to talk about Frasier. But right now, if you haven't seen Baywatch Nights, around like I think basically in the later seasons of Baywatch,
95 to 97.
But in the later seasons of Baywatch, they just stopped being on a beach, and it was about David Hasselhoff solving crimes, but there was a little bit of a supernatural element, and it had nothing to do with Baywatch, and it was probably the best. It was a fantastic... Anyway, Brett Miller was in one episode of Baywatch Nights, and also, I just had it, and he was a Mountie in an episode of Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
So probably not a real athlete, just a guy,
just a human being,
just a person they made up.
Got it.
So we get to some time passes and we get to TJ comes back. He's a big guy, and you would expect him to like not really have any real reservations about going out in front of all these women, but he seems very afraid. And Martin is the one who kind of
You're gonna be fine. Just go out there, you'll have a good time. He comes back looking haunted and definitely
a shell of a man,
communicating like he's been thoroughly objectified to the point he has no personal value, which is just the state Roz wants him in because she bought him and plans on taking advantage of him.
Right. so not Roz is the one who bought TJ.
Mm-hmm.
So Frazier then goes. It's his turn to be bidded on.
Right.
He comes back. He has no idea who bid on him, who won him.
Mm-hmm.
All he remembers hearing was someone shouting, "Shake your moneymaker!"
Surrounded by women, like a sea of female faces, a spotlight on your face, so you can't see anyone. Just yelling at him to shake his ass, take off his clothes, like a
stripper.
Yeah, essentially.
So the woman comes in. The woman who just bid on Frazier. She comes in, Christina. And she is very attractive.
She's very attractive. She paid $500.
It's obvious from the Frazier first seeing her that he's impressed with this woman.
He's a little interested. He's a little relieved. He wasn't sure what he was going to end up doing, and he ends up pretty interested.
Yeah. So he shifts gears. He goes from being very apprehensive about this whole ordeal to being pretty happy with himself that he managed to attract a woman who's a model, and get her, and now he gets to take her on a date. Yeah. We also get I think we get probably our best clue as to where Frazier lives in Seattle exactly. He says, yeah, they're making dinner plans. He says, Friday's fine. I live at the Elliott Bay Towers. Elliott Bay being, near Seattle, in Seattle, next to Seattle. I don't know. Elliott Bay Towers on the counterbalance. So according to IMDb trivia, the counterbalance refers to a very specific section of Seattle. Let's see. I just had it. Oh, yes. This is a very steep section of Queens Anne Avenue North on which cable cars operated on a counterbalance system between 1901 and 1940. So this gives us probably our clearest indication of where Frazier's apartment is actually located.
Yes.
That's the only reason I'm pointing this out.
I see. So it lives in the counterbalance.
Eventually, we're going to pin down exactly where he is.
At some point, we're going to put it on a Google map, and then we're going to go to that house. That's the final episode. That's spoiler alert. That's the final. Is we break into the Frazier home.
Even though it's a set,
yeah,
it's probably been torn down.
Oh, absolutely. But we're gonna get there. We're gonna make that happen.
So Frazier, he's excited because he's got this date. Bulldogs comes back from his bid. He apparently wasn't that big of a draw. Martin was very excited about getting him as to be a part of this bachelor auction, but apparently there wasn't very much interest. It's interesting. I don't know what the strategy was putting him on like so close to the end, but Bulldog claims money's running low, but he's still got $100 bill. And then was that it though? Because I think maybe perhaps that's Bulldog's excuse, but is that really?
Yeah. It does feel like
maybe it's just that. Maybe it's an excuse.
It does feel like at the beginning of the scenes, the green room was very full of men, and by the time it comes down to Frazier and Bulldog, it feels like there are significantly fewer people in the back area. But also, yeah, we've gone through at least 20 men because Frazier was 20 and Bulldog was 21. But either way, nobody was bidding. Martin elbows Daphne to try to get the numbers up. And one $100 bid later, Daphne is taking home Bulldog.
Why was Daphne even there?
Moral support, emotional support.
She driving Martin?
Yes, that almost certainly that.
I'm willing to entertain the possibility that yes.
And we do establish...
Had Bulldog been the first on the stage, there would have been just a mob. They would have had to...
Oh, of course.
They would have had to shut it down.
Absolutely.
But only because he was at the very end, there weren't that many bids, because everyone was out of money at that point.
And I do want to point out, so you were asking, and most likely Daphne was there to continue to watch over Martin and provide support but we do establish before the bachelor auction how interested Daphne is, and how she's always wanted to bid on a man and make...
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she was probably just there for the fun of it.
Probably there to just participate in a sort of opportunity to buy a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we get, it's sort of an interesting shift in dynamics because so Bulldog he's not that upset with...
No, Bulldog is pretty stoked. He's got a woman who's bid on him, and he's still thinking I'm going to get some action because this woman wanted to bid on me. He's unaware that Daphne is not particularly interested. Meanwhile, Frazier's expectations were defied because he thought it was going to be awful, and he's actually pretty excited for this date.
Yeah. So we get to the big night of the date. Mm-hmm. We're in Frazier's apartment, and yeah. So we're in Frazier's apartment. He's prepared this beautiful meal for Christina. Christina gets to the door. She apologizes to Frazier because, unfortunately, as a model, she just received notice of a job. She's been hired
right
for a photo shoot.
So Frazier is like, hey, we have dinner, and Christina's like, sorry, I have this job. First of all, she says, sorry, I'm late, but I got a last minute call for a job, which isn't a reason to be late. That's especially if the last minute call is like if you have a job upcoming later that night, you shouldn't be late.
You got to work out the details. You got to figure out, what am I going to wear?
Right, but no, Adam.
That's not my biggest complaint about this episode, Wes.
No, there are other things. I just want to get this. There are a number of issues from this point forward that I want to make sure we cover all of them. Christina reveals, like, Frazier is like, oh, of course, I totally understand why you'd be late. You have a job. Well, you're here now. And because she's like, no, you don't understand. The job's tonight. We're going to have dinner later. And then Frazier says, oh, fine, okay. And then reveals that he rented a restaurant trolley.
Did he actually rent it? Because
I think he was goofing. I think he was goofing when he said he owned it. I hope he was goofing. Otherwise, he just owns a restaurant.
I watched the scene a couple times, and I each time I watched it, the sincerity of it sounded more and more convincing.
All right. But then here comes the unforgivable bit. The everything else could be Tidgy. But then she reveals, there's just one more thing. Her model friend Sandy also got called in for the same modeling job, and she was supposed to look after her daughter for this date with Frazier, I suppose. Subsequently, she has brought her daughter unannounced without calling ahead. First of all, this all could have been said in a phone call instead of being dropped on Frazier's lap. Hey, so I got this job very last minute. I won't be able to come over, but I need to find a babysitter for my daughter. Instead of like, hey, great news, you're watching my daughter. That's what you're doing. And then Christina revealed, look, I wouldn't do this. I'm in a jam. First of all, the phrase "I wouldn't do this" implies that you wouldn't do this, but clearly you're in the middle of doing this. So your words are meaningless, Christina. Look, Sandy will take her just as soon as we get back, and that'll leave just the two of us. Christina gives Frazier a very like pouty, cute model sort of look, and then Frazier says, "Okay, I'll hang out with your daughter."
Well, not before he points out that he's going to get a lot of points for this.
Right, so he's aware.
Imaginary sex points.
Imaginary sex points that you trade in at your local Chuck E. Cheese for prizes.
Or sex.
Yep.
Not at the Chuck E. Cheese though. That's awful.
Well.
But yeah, so it seems. I guess, yeah, now that you brought this up, I guess I can kind of see, I think Christina was betting on Frazier taking her daughter because, I mean, it's
a little bit of it's a manipulative thing to kind of do.
Yeah, it's pretty manipulative.
If it were actually a request, she would have called ahead. She wouldn't have brought the daughter and imposed it on Frazier and then put up these puppy dog eyes. It's a little bit manipulative. So,
I think they say at some point later on the alternative was to have her stay at home.
Right, which is that was a thing that Renata, the daughter character, who we'll get into, but Renata says like, oh no, that's the point. That's the thing. Is Christina said that Renata was okay. We're gonna get there, but Renata's fabricating these stories about. How bad of a mother Christina is, and then Christina at the end is like, oh, she's saying these things because I wouldn't leave her at home, and she is 12, which is an odd. Hey, okay, sorry, we'll get there. We're gonna get there, or we're gonna get there organically.
We're gonna get there, Wes. I promise you.
Thank you. But Christina leaves Renata, her daughter, and Frazier tries to be friendly and offers her some goose liver or a soft drink, and then tries to compliment her name. And Renata immediately wants to hop on his phone to start calling her friends. Which, honestly, I'm surprised that... Okay, we'll get... But, so, we'll just fast forward to the next scene. I'm sorry. Renata starts speaking in the youth lingo on the phone, where it's revealed that she's been talking for, like, a while. And meanwhile, she's throwing Cheetos on Frazier's couch at Eddie, and they're bouncing off the couch material, which is not good for the couch. But she's saying over and over again, "No way, that's so fresh. No way, no way." And then she hangs up on somebody that's calling Frasier's line. And then it turns out the call was for Frazier. And it turns out there are a number of Tiffany's calling Renata. And Frazier makes makes a comment, because one of them is Tiffany Schwartz, implying that they're Jewish. The other one is Tiffany Martinez. And Frazier says, "Celebrate the ethnic mosaic that is America," but nonetheless, and hangs up the phone. It turns out that Renata's been talking for an hour and a half on the phone and hasn't said a word to Frazier, which would make more sense if, like, he was actively pursuing a relationship with Christina, but this is their first date, and honestly, I wouldn't really want to hang out with a first date's kid anyway. I would probably be fine with them being on the phone and me just, like, sitting on and, like, watching TV or something. But Frazier gets very offended because he's very proper and very, like, highbrow. So he's not happy that this child is sitting in his home and calling people on his phone.
Well, it's a teenager.
Right.
It's the other thing. It's not just the fact that it's her daughter. It's sort of a teenager who,
as we've cut, if Renata is being honest about her age, she is not a teenager. She is 12 years old, which is weird to leave. Yeah.
Pretty close.
It is a 12-year-old that Christina, her mother, has decided to leave with a relative stranger, an admittedly famous stranger who is an AM radio host, much like a Bill Cosby or a Jimmy Savile. So you can trust those people, right? Clearly. So, and it's one of those things that we're going to dismiss later, that, she's making up these things because she's an angsty teenager. It is a completely valid point that her model mother left her with her date for the evening without any real knowledge of who this man is. The most she's gotten is the fact that she watches his radio show sometimes, listens to it.
I want to say Renata's played by the little girl from Monster Squad.
Oh, that's fun.
Have you ever seen Monster Squad?
Yeah, that's the one where the kids fight all the monsters and stuff. For a second, I mixed it up with the one starring Howie Mandel, but no, Monster Squad is the one where...
The Little Monsters?
Yes, different film. Monster Squad is a different film. I have seen Monster Squad. It's a very fun film.
I haven't, actually.
Oh, okay. It was written by Shane Black.
It's supposed to be good. Is it Little Monster? What's that one with Howie Mandel?
Howie Mandel stars in, it's the one where he's a weird blue monster man, monster under the bed, something.
It is Little Monsters.
It is.
Yeah.
You got it. It is Little Monsters. Yeah.
All right.
Starring Fred Savage. Let's get back to Frasier.
Brother of Ben Savage, who was on Boy Meets World.
He was on Boy Meets World.
We're just going off on all sorts of tangents.
You know, I love Ryder Strong. You know, he was in the horror film Cabin Fever, which you might recall was directed by Eli Roth, who of course went on to make both the Hostel films.
Yes, and hold on. Matthew Lawrence, who is in some of the later seasons of Boy Meets World, he played a character in the movie Boltneck, which was one of Ryan Reynolds' very first movies.
Also known as Big Monster on Campus.
Also known as Teen Monster.
Very fun.
But Boltneck it's his proper title.
I don't know if you know this. That movie was also featuring Shelley Duvall.
It's got a lot of weird casting in it.
Yeah.
Anyway, getting I don't know how we got from Frasier to Boltneck. Jesus.
We made it. We made that journey.
So, we're going. So yeah, Renata. God, I don't even know where we are now. Rihanna.
Rihanna.
She's basically, she's kind of a nuisance, but Frasier is making an effort to sort of relate to her. He tries to convince her that he's hip, I guess.
Yeah, so she's complaining about her mother, about the fact that she's been left with a perv, and then Frasier offers her seafood crepes lobster Newburg, and then corn dog dipped in curare, which is apparently, according to the transcript notes, curare is a very powerful neurotoxin found in South America, sort of similar to how you might roofie a drink, a la Bill Cosby. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Renata asks if Frazier has any raw cookie dough, to which Frazier replies, even more lethal, and he gets raw cookie dough out of the pouch and just hands it to it. Pulls a full packet and gives her a full tube of
definitely something you should give your date's daughter when you're babysitting.
I mean, it's this and Cheetos. She's a 12-year-old. Ugh. But anyway, so Frazier starts selling himself like, you're saying you have all these problems with your mom. I'm a psychiatrist. I'll listen. And then Renata talks about all these, like, oh, you want me to tell you all my problems, like those Gomers on your show, which is a reference to Gomer Pyle, which is a sitcom from the 50s.
I actually is it, because I looked up Gomer. I anticipated we were going to have this conversation.
Oh, did you?
And the first thing I found was Urban Dictionary, and it defines it as medical slang for a patient who has lost, often through age, what goes into being a human. So it apparently stands for "get out of my emergency room."
Oh, that's interesting.
So I think this is. So I mean, she's. I guess she's calling these people, crazy. I'm not quite sure exactly if this is even related to her use of the word Gomer.
So while we're getting into this term of Gomer that you're describing was made popular by the 1978 satirical novel The House of God. Gomer Pyle was 1962. So pick your poison, listener that's listening to this podcast, if you think it was based on this 1978 book or based on Gomer Pyle, whichever one you think a 12-year-old in 1994 is more likely to be referencing.
So that bit of slang, and basically, and she does kind of open up to Frazier. She talks about how, she basically goes off talking about how, when she was at her birthday, she left her alone so she could get a tattoo. She lies about how old she is, so that way people don't know how old she is. And she just makes Christina out to be a bad mother,
to be just a monster. That's and her father is out on the road with Whitesnake, which I thought was a band and is a band, but instead we're not.
Frazier asks Whitesnake, is that a musical group or a pet? And he's closer with musical group
because it's Tony's new wife.
Here I go again on my own. Go down on your road, I'll never know.
Like a drip. Anyway, we'll cover this because really this next scene only serves to close Bulldog's loop, which is not the problem I have. Daphne proceeds to get very inebriated. I was going to skip over the scene, and then I realized it sort of ties into the larger Bill Cosby date rape. For some reason, Daphne is.
Skip this scene?
I was gonna kind of get through it quickly so we can complain more about Christina and Renata, but then I remembered the fact that Bulldog is trying to get Daphne so drunk, possibly for the purpose of sleeping with her, because he says things like, "Man, you're really looped. This is great," which is Daphne is talking a whole lot, and she's very chatty and explaining that she's having a great time despite the fact that she didn't think she would. She's had a lot to drink. Then she calls into the intercom to make sure the driver isn't drinking. Then she starts saying how long it is to get out of the parking lot. This is her first basketball game. She's just being very, very talkative. She's insisting on drinking more and more. Then she insults.
She's insulting Bulldog this entire time too.
Right.
That's the other thing that I found humorous about the scene is that
she does eventually call him stupid. He doesn't have an idea in his head. And then she wants to drink more.
Which again, he doesn't have any response to.
Right. He's not a quick-witted man. And then he starts talking about how when does she? Oh yeah, she. Before that, she talks about how being tall is the only measure of a man, and then realizes that Bulldog is short. and then makes the comment that he's stupid, and then starts yelling at the Pontiac Firebird that is honking because she wants to yell at him, and then starts yelling at him to shut his bloody cake hole, at which point somebody, a very tall man apparently, gets out of the Firebird, comes around to Bulldog's side, and yanks him out of the car, at which point the limo just keeps driving, which I don't...
Bulldog is ripped from this limo.
Right.
And we never see or hear from him again in this episode, which leads me to believe that Bulldog is dead.
This is
Bulldog's last episode. He was murdered after
Bulldog was killed in the parking lot of the arena of the Seattle SuperSonics.
And you just wanted to skip over that.
And he will rest in peace. He is permanently put out of commission.
Never see Bulldog again. He was so young.
This is not actually Bulldog's last episode, is it?
You want to bet?
I will. I would put one whole treehouse dollar on it.
Next scene.
We'll keep rolling.
Frazier and Renata have done a little bit of bonding now that she's sort of opened up to him about her traumatic childhood. And they're both eating raw cookie dough.
And by the end, Frazier has sort of developed a sort of Stockholm syndrome. Like he is now calling Christina her fabulousness, just like Renata did. And then
he's fully on her side.
100% on her side. Which, to be fair, up to this point, Renata has painted herself as an abused child. It would be irresponsible not to take her side. It's a little bit childish of Frazier to be like, "Ugh, it's your mom," instead of like, "Do you want me to call the authorities? Because it sounds like you're being abused regularly by both parents."
Horribly.
Neglected.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. And of course, Christina shows up to pick up her daughter, and this is when Frazier kind of lets Christina have it. He has been hearing all these stories about how terrible of a mother she is, and he goes from liking her to basically talking about how much of a terrible mother she is. I mean, I guess he doesn't really give it to her that hard, but
right. She reacts like he has attacked her at the core of who she is. Also, I don't want to skip any Christina dialogue because I don't like her. She says, "Thanks for helping me out. Now roll out that trolley. I'm starving," which is a dick thing to say.
Right, when you were the one who can't. Yeah, you're the reason why. Yeah.
I was just hanging out with your daughter for 4 hours. Now bring me the food you made. It's gotten cold? Well, make it again.
Yeah, microwave it.
Put it in the heater and heat it. I want the food.
Yeah, so he talks about how the morning weigh-ins, leaving her with a coach. So yeah, at some point Renata said that she makes her way in because her mom's a supermodel and therefore she's very thin and doesn't eat anything, so she makes her do the same.
Right, and Frazier says the time you left her with the coat check girl at the Palladium so you could go dancing. I mean, what kind of excuse for a mother are you anyway? And then Christina gets really offended, like, how could you think I would do that? Christina, you just did that. You just left your daughter with a
virtual stranger.
With the host of a local morning radio show so you could go work a quick night gig. You have no basis of truth right now. I'm not saying Renata isn't fabricating these stories, but don't come at it like it's ridiculous because you just did this.
I mean, yeah, that is... Yeah, I see where you're coming from now, Wes. She definitely doesn't have a lot of credibility.
Christina also claims this is the first night I've been out in over a year, which, like, are you modeling during the day out? Do you not take night? Like, is this...
Modeling is kind of a gig-based
right
job, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't think you were, unless you, I guess, had some sort of major modeling contract, you're probably, which I don't think she does.
Right. You're probably working odd hour. Like, she does have, like, she just got off of apparently a very lucrative photo shoot that she could drop $500 on.
Unless she has another job that she hasn't told us about.
I mean...
Which also seems possible.
I think Okay. But anyway, so Christina, apparently, John and Marianne, John being her actual husband, her previous husband, her ex-husband, and Marianne, John's new wife, Tony and Whitesnake, are apparently their two dogs. Apparently, most nights
so she Kaiser Soze'd this, basically.
Right.
Frazier got Kaiser Soze.
She was looking around the apartment. She was like, "Oh, she saw one of those paintings of dogs playing poker that, of course, Frazier has because he's a classy guy." And she proceeded to fabricate this large story off of this painting of two dogs playing poker.
So yeah. Frazier's been duped, and he slowly realizes this, and he's kind of blown his chances with this stunning model, very attractive. He was duped by a young girl into believing that she was a child abuser, which, I mean, she's still not Parent of the Year, but
no,
she's not.
Absolutely, she probably had. First of all, I think one of Frazier's possible mistakes was believing that there's a human being named Whitesnake. But other than that, I don't think Frazier is too far in the wrong. I think you should believe people when they try to come at you with allegations of abuse. You want to listen to them. And try to discern and help them, and that's something Frazier. I mean, he was more catty about it than he was like wanting to bring in outside intervention. But he was still like on her side, which isn't necessarily the wrong thing to do. If you're a parent and someone's like, "Hey, your child said these things," that you're doing these things, you would be like, I feel like you'd be more understanding. Like, "Thank you for helping me," instead of like, "Well, now you don't get to fuck me." Like, that's weird of Christina.
Yeah, if this were a real situation with real people, I can see where Christina maybe just would have been like, haha, you fell for my
you fell for my daughter, who is a pathological liar. That she does that. Hey, let's have dinner. I am starving. Roll out that trolley.
So Christina leaves. She's upset, and Frazier doesn't get to have his date. So she's just donated to a very charitable cause without getting any benefit from it.
Without getting to sleep with a I would say marginally successful local radio host.
Yeah. Martin, so we cut to, I guess, a few hours later. Frazier's still at home. He's still eating raw cookie dough. More importantly, he's eating after Eddie, which is something that only when they're at your lowest would a character
share cookie dough with a dog that a dog just took a bite of, and now you're taking a bite. Oh, Frazier.
At this point, Frazier's trying to kill himself with cookie dough.
Yeah, essentially.
So Martin comes back. He asks Frazier about his date. Frazier, he doesn't really get into specifics of it, but it's clear that it wasn't a fun time.
No.
So there's a ring on the telephone. Frazier answers it, and it's Daphne. He asks her, "How was your evening?" And he says, "No way."
No way.
Like Renata was doing earlier when she was having her phone calls.
And if I may, here's the tough thing about writing. I think that's a clever callback. I'm looking at the transcript and I'm like, that's great. I think Kelsey Grammer is a fantastic actor. I don't think the pause was long enough, and I don't think he nailed the intonation or you can hear in the studio audience that was definitely supposed to be like the big laugh to end the episode, and the laugh was not big enough to get them to like the fade out, and it's like,
well, and the implication, so that we don't hear Daphne's side of the phone conversation, but the implication is that she called Frazier up and says, "Listen, Frazier, your coworker Bulldog tried to get me drunk and have sex with me, but then he got ripped away from our limo, and now he's dead.
Hey, Daphne, how was your evening? I'm at the morgue. You have to come here and identify Bulldog's body. We have to go by his dental records. No way!
No way!
Yeah.
But no, they're not at the morgue. We see during the credits, Frazier, Daphne, Martin, and Eddie are all in the limo finishing off the champagne, and in the background we just see Bulldog's lifeless corpse lying in the parking lot.
Right. Presumably they went to drive to go meet and hang out in the limo, which is still at the parking lot of the Seattle SuperSonics arena, while Bulldog is being beaten to death. Or his corpse is being beaten still by a very angry Sonics fan who probably was at a losing game because it was a Sonics game.
It was a sad end to a character that gave us so many laughs. It was only just yesterday that I remember rewatching that episode where he was doing the impression of the Chinese man. That was we'll miss the guy.
Rest in peace, Bulldog, and a flock of angels sing thee to thy rest.
Yeah, that's going to be our episode. Can't Buy Me Love. Wes, any closing thoughts? Any jokes that we liked? I mean,
I do have to say I enjoy. First of all, reading the notes, I really like the Carrare joke, the whole joke about poisoning her.
I just discovered that as I was reading through the transcript, and that's pretty good.
I did like. I liked the execution of the joke. That it's a simple joke. Just the whole, like, you just got off the phone with Tiffany. No, this is the other Tiffany. And changing the last names and making it clear she's got a multi-ethnic group of different Tiffany's that she likes to call on the phone. I thought that was fun. But genuinely, it was tough getting over just how weird the moral of this episode is, and the ending where Frazier is afraid that his little boy, when he's 12, is going to be a pathological liar, which I guess is a legitimate fear because, again, we've gone this entire time and Frazier still hasn't been in the same room with his young son, with Freddie. Who
knows what kind of child Lilith is raising in Boston. I think Freddie's in good hands. Okay. And we will get to see a lot more of Freddie. Later on. I'm sad that we haven't gotten to see really any of them this season. I don't think we will. There's one thing that I want to point out, and it's not a joke, but it's the scene where they're backstage at the Bachelor auction, and TJ just comes back from his auction. Roz, of course, is the one who bid it on him. Roz bursts in, and she says, "I saw what I want, and I went after it." and Frazier, he does sort of a weird. It's this bizarre moment. He just sort of stands up really suddenly. He says, "Roz!" Like it's very exaggerated. I don't know. It made me laugh.
Yeah,
it's not a joke, but that whole physical action was humorous.
Yeah, they were funny bits. The moral is what sticks in my craw, but I did like Roz coming in very dramatically in the doorway. I thought that was fun.
Yeah. So we might as well talk about our next episode. You Can't Tell a Crook by His Cover. After Roz is scanned by a street con, Frazier claims to be able to spot a criminal, so Martin challenges him to a test. Several friends coming over to play poker, including one ex-con. Frazier wins if he can spot the con.
The twist of the episode is, of course, one of the person that Martin invites to the poker game one of them is the Black Lotus killer that Martin has been trying to hunt down his entire life.
Oh, that would be so good. Well, we'll see it next time on the Frazier on Frazier podcast. Until then, have a great night, people listening.
Yep.
And thank you, Wes, for being here, and good night.
Special thanks to Ryder Strong from Boy Meets World.
Oh, God. The Frazier on Frazier podcast wishes to thank KACL780.net for providing episode transcripts and Ronald O'Connell for providing our theme song, Frazier MIDI.